The old farmhouse stood at the edge of a quiet hill, surrounded by wheat fields that shimmered like gold in the afternoon sun. For decades, the Marshalls had owned the land, passing it from one generation to the next, but few outside the family knew what secrets lay behind those weathered walls. When Rachel Marshall inherited the property from her grandfather, she thought it would be a peaceful retreat, a break from the buzz of city life. She couldn't have known she was about to uncover something that had been buried, both literally and emotionally, for over 50 years. Rachel was in her early 30s, a graphic designer who had grown tired of the chaos in Chicago. The idea of renovating the farmhouse had seemed romantic at first, especially with her dog, Murphy, as her only companion. The air was clean, the stars were clearer than she'd ever seen, and she was excited to explore her family's roots. Her grandfather, Thomas Marshall, had passed away suddenly, and with no surviving siblings or children besides Rachel's father, the house had gone to her. She remembered visiting the farm as a child, but never staying the night. Her father had always made excuses: too cold, too far, too boring. The house had an eerie charm, and it didn't take long before Rachel started noticing small things. The attic door would be open when she was sure she'd left it closed. The wind chimes on the back porch clanged loudly in the stillest weather. Sometimes she'd find muddy footprints in the hallway, always small, like those of a child. At first, she blamed the wind, or perhaps Murphy tracking in dirt from outside, but then the dreams started. They were always the same: a little boy standing by the well behind the barn. He didn't speak, but he would point at something, his eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. One night, Rachel followed him in the dream and woke up covered in dirt, standing in her grandfather's old tool shed with a rusty shovel in her hand. The next day, she went to the well. It was sealed with a wooden lid covered in moss, heavy but loose enough for her to slide aside. Inside, the air was thick and cold. She lowered a flashlight down with a rope, expecting to see water or debris. Instead, she saw something wrapped in cloth, something that looked too much like a body. Rachel called the local sheriff. They brought in a forensic team and carefully exhumed the remains. The bones were of a small child, around 6 or 7 years old, buried decades ago. A locket found with the body contained a photo of a little boy and a woman Rachel didn't recognize. The sheriff's office started an investigation, and with help from a genealogist, they eventually traced the boy back to Thomas Marshall's younger brother, Caleb. No one had known Caleb existed. Records were scarce. The only evidence was a faded birth certificate tucked inside a Bible in the attic. Rachel's grandfather had never spoken of him. A retired neighbor later told her that Caleb had gone missing one summer, and everyone believed he'd run off or been taken. But no one ever suspected Thomas. Rachel never found out the whole truth, only pieces. Her grandfather's journal mentioned protecting the family and keeping secrets buried. It was likely Caleb had been hurt, perhaps accidentally, and Thomas had hidden it to protect his parents from scandal. But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that her grandfather had lived with that guilt every day. After the remains were reburied with a proper headstone, the strange noises in the house stopped, and Rachel no longer had the dreams. She stayed on the farm but never forgot the look in the little boy's eyes. Miles away in the suburbs of Virginia, another secret simmered under the calm surface of a family dinner table. Daniel and Emily Thompson had been married for 15 years, with 2 children and a picturesque home in Ashburn. To outsiders, they were the ideal American family. Daniel worked in IT, Emily taught 2nd grade, and they had a Labrador named Buddy who wagged his tail at every visitor. But something had been gnawing at Emily for years, ever since the day Daniel's mother, Irene, passed away. Irene had been a stern woman, always tight-lipped about the past. She had a room in the basement no one was allowed to enter, not even Daniel as a child. She kept the door locked and carried the key on a chain around her neck. After her funeral, Emily insisted they go through the house together and clean it out before selling. It was Daniel who found the key in his mother's jewelry box. He hesitated, but Emily convinced him it was just a room. Maybe old keepsakes, maybe dusty furniture. What they found was something else entirely. The room was cold and silent, lit only by a dangling bulb from the ceiling. Along one wall were shelves of notebooks, dozens of them, each labeled with years. The entries started in 1963 and went all the way to 1999. Most were mundane shopping lists, neighborhood gossip, but then came one notebook that stood out. It was labeled DT. Inside, they found detailed accounts of a child who had been kept in the house, Daniel's twin brother, Michael. Emily's heart dropped as she read the entries, each one more disturbing than the last. Michael had been born with a congenital condition, something Irene considered shameful. According to her writings, she hid the child in the basement, homeschooling him and rarely letting him out. There were no records of Michael at the hospital, no birth certificate, nothing to prove he ever existed. Daniel had no memory of a twin, but as they pieced together the journals, a clearer picture emerged. Michael had lived in that room for over 10 years, and one entry mentioned a severe fever he'd caught one winter. The journal stopped abruptly after that. The police were notified, and forensic teams searched the house and yard. They found skeletal remains behind the wall of the basement, wrapped in a faded quilt. DNA confirmed it was Daniel's twin. His mother had kept him hidden, not from malice, but from misguided fear and shame. The family moved away shortly after, unable to remain in the home. Daniel went through therapy to cope with the betrayal, and Emily did her best to support him. Their marriage survived, but the silence at the dinner table never fully left. Far out in a quiet corner of Oregon, a girl named Lucy Harper had always been curious about her heritage. Her parents, David and Karen, were adoptive, loving, supportive, but never forthcoming about Lucy's past. On her 18th birthday, she received a manila envelope in the mail. Inside was a birth certificate with her name on it, a letter written in shaky cursive, and a photograph of a woman holding a baby wrapped in a sunflower blanket. The letter was from her biological mother, Elise. She explained that she had given Lucy up to protect her, from the family, from the past, from the darkness she couldn't escape. Elise had grown up in a compound in northern Idaho, part of a group that believed in spiritual cleansing through isolation. Children were raised in silence for their first 5 years. Those who spoke too soon were punished. Elise had escaped when she was 16 and later gave birth to Lucy. But the letter wasn't just about escape. Elise warned Lucy never to seek out the family, never to look for the place where she was born. But Lucy had always been drawn to mysteries, and despite her parents' pleas, she used the birth records and the photograph's background to track down the property. It was abandoned now, deep in the woods, but the house still stood.